partner at Center of Strategic Mindset. And on behalf of COSM, we welcome you all to this panel discussion where we have a wonderful spread of panelists who are here to share their perspectives very candidly with all of you and also try and address each one of your queries. Very briefly, COSM is a boutique strategy, leadership development, executive coaching, innovation, and design thinking consulting firm. Our mission is to groom strategic minds who can deliver bold business impact. COSM is founded by Himanshu Saxena, who's had 6 careers in his lifetime, beginning with a geologist, then a stint in military, then United Nations, then consulting, then corporations, and consequently entrepreneurship. His depth of expertise and diversity of experiences has earned him a place in the world top 100 coaches and a leading thinker. So, change is a natural course for him, renewal is a constant pursuit. He's our moderator as well as the panel member today. So, right now, I'll hand over this session to him for facilitation. Himanshu, over to you.
Thank you, Ridhima. Good evening, friends, fellow colleagues, and wonderful leaders. Thank you for joining us. It's an absolute delight to have you with us and an honor for me to host and moderate this discussion for you. I have two responsibilities, one as a panelist, another as a moderator for this session. So please give a big round of applause for all the panelists that have come from all over, and it's a delight to have them. Thank you very much. A few instructions, I'll not dwell much, so stay on mute, and when we have the Q&A session, you have an opportunity to come. We are live on YouTube, so if you want to be a celebrity, please keep your videos on. If you face any problem, please share it in the chat window and my team will pick it up for you. To ask your questions later on, you have two options. Be on the video, raise your hand, and we'll pick that up from there. Or simply put your question in the chat box, we'll take it from there. So if you are good with instructions, give me a high five. You have icons, you can click them and let me see if everyone has understood and received the instructions. Thank you. So guys, let me welcome our wonderful and amazing panelists. So our first panelist is Harry Kramer Jr. He's the former chairman and chief executive officer of Baxter International Inc., a multi-billion-dollar global healthcare company. He's based out of Chicago, Illinois. He's currently the professor of management strategy at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. There he teaches leadership and strategy to MBA and executive MBA programs. Now this clearly shows his passion for leadership in his journey of first.
Hey, you look awesome in orange or red. And you look wonderful. Good to see you. I can't hear you.
Okay, let me just mute this. Yes, so this clearly shows his passion for leadership in his journey of learn, apply, gain expertise, build expertise, and then teach, transfer, and transform. I personally love this kind of journey and will do anything to sit in your class, Harry, one day and be a student and learn few things from you. Additionally, he's an executive partner with Madison Dearborn Partners, one of the largest private equity firms in the United States, where he consults with CEOs and other senior executives of companies in MDP's extensive portfolio. He was voted by his students at Kellogg's as Professor of the Year in 2008 and was a finalist for the award in 2014. Apart from his journey as a leader, one of his biggest passions he pursues is called One Acre Fund. A One Acre Fund is a non-profit social enterprise that supplies financing and training to help smallholders grow their way out of hunger and build lasting pathways to prosperity. Trust me, I watched the video shot in Kenya, and the kind of smile that he's bringing through his initiatives is really amazing. I'd like you to check that out later on. Welcome aboard, Harry. It's an absolute honor to have you. Our next speaker today is Manoj Kohli. Manoj is the former Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Bharti Airtel Limited. We all know without Airtel, we could not have got connected in 90s. He is also the former Executive Chairman of SoftBank Energy, part of the SoftBank group led by Masayoshi Son. He is currently the country head SoftBank India. Manoj on one hand is a visionary, on the other hand he is extremely grounded and unassuming. His stories and leadership experiences are rooted in big thinking or big picture, grassroots level of intelligence, practical application, and grounded excellence. In a nutshell, he makes leadership look very simple and effective. One of his greatest passion is fitness. If you've not seen him at 60, he's remarkably fit and is a role model for many for the fitness at 60. I watched his couple of videos doing front roll, which we used to do in academy, and that goes on to prove that fitness is his very passionate theme. Fitness is also a very important factor for leading effectively. Welcome aboard, Manoj. It's a privilege for us to have you with us and share your thought process. After Manoj, you will hear from me, so I'll skip my introduction. Our next speaker is Mr. O.P. Bhatt. Now, Mr. Bhatt is the former chairman of State Bank Group, the largest bank in India. He is currently a board member and an independent director in some of the best companies globally: Tata Steels, Tata Consultancy Services, Tata Motors, Hindustan Unilever, Aadhaar, and Greenco Energy Holdings. By just looking at the portfolio of the companies, you can imagine how sought after he is. If I think of a great student of life, leadership, and legacy, Mr. Bhatt is indeed the student of the year, always and every time. His hunger to learn and curiosity are unmatched and unparalleled. The size of the scale, scope, and complexity that is handled is unparalleled. Welcome to the panel discussion, Mr. Bhatt. It's indeed a delight to have you with us. Our final speaker from New York is Eric Schoenberg. Eric is the Chief Executive Officer of Mansueto Ventures, the owner of Inc. and Fast Company Media Properties. In prior roles, he served as Editor-in-Chief of Inc., CBS Money Watch, Money Magazine. He and the publications he ran won numerous journalism awards, including Loeb Award and the 2 National Magazines Awards for General Excellence. To me, Eric symbolizes innovation. His company, Fast Company and Inc., are known for leading and inspiring innovation in its own way. Eric is a keen observer, amazing learner, and a wonderful student of life experiences. I had the privilege of meeting him first time in Ixtapa, Mexico, where I was facilitating a morning yoga and meditation session. And as a student, he displayed his best dexterity and flexibility in learning the things. I personally have experienced his Fast Company Impact Council, and some of the things that he's doing are amazing. His team vouches for him. He joins us from New York right in the morning, 7 a.m. Eric, thanks for joining us. So welcome to this panel discussion. So guys, let's give a big round of applause to all the people. All right, to begin with, I will first invite Harry. So the format is like this. Each of the panelists gets a chance to speak for about 7 to 8 minutes. Once they've spoken, I will ask one or two questions from each one of them to build the traction, and thereafter I shall open the house for discussion and Q&A. So with that, Harry, that's your place. Enjoy the show. Thank you.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for folks, wherever folks happen to be. And it's my honor to join. I've had a chance to spend time with Himanshu several times, and it's always a great pleasure. So in this period of crisis, and in talking about around the world, and in talking about the importance of leading in crisis, I'll just share a couple thoughts. And I always tell the students at Northwestern Kellogg that I have very, very few answers, but like all of us, I have many, many opinions. Okay, so I don't do Q&A, I do Q&O, question and opinion. And the way I think about this is that in any crisis, and we can talk about any crisis, and now this one in particular, I think the first thing you have to do if you're going to talk about leadership is you have to learn how to lead yourself. Because I don't know how it's possible that I could lead other people if I can't lead myself. And in order to do that, I believe the requirement is to step back, get off by myself, turn off the noise, and spend a couple minutes thinking about what really matters. What are my values? What's my purpose? What matters? What kind of a leader do I want to be? What kind of example do I want to set for others? Because until I do that, I don't think I'm prepared to lead anybody or anything. And obviously, we all know when a crisis occurs, if I start to figure out how I'm going to do things once the crisis starts, it's too late. So if Himanshu's upset about something and I say, Himanshu, hey, don't worry about it. Well, worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, stress has already set in. It's almost a little too late. So from my perspective, as a result of taking the time to be self-reflective, knowing myself and knowing my values, what I take the time to think about is, I'm not going to wait for the crisis. I know it's going to happen. I know things aren't going to go well. They're not going to go well in my career, in my family, in my spiritual life, you name it. So I ask myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Not if, but when there's a crisis. And I decided many years ago, I know what I will do when there's a crisis. I'm going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do the right thing. Now, when you say you're going to do the right thing, that makes one enormous assumption. What's the right thing? So I better surround myself with some very, very strong value-based people, all right? I may be able to get a hold of Eric. I may be able to get a hold of Himanshu. I may be able to get a hold of my wife. I got to find a few people that I believe their values are intact, their focus is doing the right thing. In an uncertain world, I, with their help, will try to do the right thing. That's the first thing I'll do. The second thing I'll do is I'll do the best I can do, because at the end of the day, that's all I can do. Now, I'm giving you folks the short version of what I spend hours on with the students, but here's the little formula. If no matter what happens tomorrow, I already know what I'll do. I'll try to do the right thing. I'll do the best I can do. And I will state that over and over again. And what happens then, worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, and stress can be significantly reduced. They can never be eliminated, right? We're humans, so welcome to the human race. And we've all been in situations, job-wise, career-wise, where a boss may say, you know, hey, a little bit of pressure and stress isn't all bad. The problem is, often we have so much that it becomes unbearable. And I think as we're running around, there's this tendency to confuse activity and productivity. You know, everybody on the call today is very, very active. It's amazingly how active we are. But you can't do everything. And your ability to be self-reflective and decide, what am I going to do? So here as I sit now in the United States, and it's Thursday, I think. With this whole thing, it gets a little confusing what day it is. But I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow. But in a way, no matter what happens tomorrow, I know what I'll do. So if not to be morbid, but if I take the worst situation for me, what's the worst that could happen for me tomorrow? I think it would be that something unfortunate happens to my wife, Julie, or something happens to one of my 5 children. I hope it doesn't happen. I'll pray that it doesn't happen. But I will honestly tell the group, if it happens, I know what I will do. I'll try to do the right thing. I'll do the best I can do. And that has an enormous impact on my ability to lead myself. And then I can start to lead my team. And in leading my team, what I'll then say to myself is, okay, what are we going to do? So I'll just pretend that everybody here is on my team. And now we have a crisis, all right? Well, often when there's a crisis, let's be honest, what the leader ends up saying is, well, boy, I've got to think about this more. I can't really talk about it yet because I don't know everything, and I better wait till I know everything. And as we all know as leaders, there's no way we're going to know everything. And the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get for people. So I'll leave you with a little 3-part formula, which I used at Baxter, which I use at Madison Dearborn, which I use with my family, which I use in all my classes at Kellogg. And it goes like this. We're in a crisis. Here's what I will do, a 3-part. Number 1, I, with Himanshu and everybody's help, will tell people what we know. Now, we're not going to make it up. We're not going to create false news. We're not going to tell people what they'd like to hear. We will openly and honestly tell people what we know based on our team and the facts, number 1. Number 2, we'll tell people what we don't know. Here's what we don't know right now. Here's why we don't know it. And here's what we're doing about to know more, which gets me to part 3. And part 3 is how fast I'll get back to you with what I don't know. Here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and here's how quick I'll get back to you. That builds trust, that builds integrity, that builds vulnerability, which, as we all know, as a leader, for Eric to ask me a question and say, hey, Eric, I don't know, but you know what, my friend? Here's what I'm doing to be able to get you an answer in the best way I can, and I'll give you an update tomorrow. And in my mind, that combination of always being in a position to say, I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm openly going to honestly tell you what I know, what I don't know, and how quickly I'll get back to you. I'm in a position, in my mind, to be able to effectively lead myself. And if I can lead myself, I can then lead other people. So that's a Cliff Note version. And for the first time in my life, I've actually kept it to the time allotted to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry. It's so precise and so cryptic and so powerful. Right thing and best thing. And I'm seeing this as a quadrant of 2 by 2. And if you put that right and best, I think there's a fair chance of making a great choice all the time, most of the time.
Thank you.
I also love the 3 things: what I know, what I'll get back to know, and what I don't know. And that's so remarkable because people love to hear the truth. They can handle the truth. All right, so with this, we'll move to our next speaker, Manoj. Manoj, good to have you. Let's proceed with you. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshu. I'm great to be invited by you. I'm happy that all of us are sitting together discussing a very serious matter. I believe that we are in a once-in-a-century situation. And the situation, while it is once in a century, it's still very uncertain. The certainty part of it is small, and the uncertainty part, even today, after 3 months, is quite high. But at the same time, I've learned few things in life. One, that try to convert every threat into opportunity. And second, that never get a good crisis to go waste. And it's so important that we utilize this crisis, and especially leaders have to utilize this crisis to reset themselves, reset the organization, reset the business, check the purpose, check the meaning, check the lifestyle, get the life goals be modified according to the new environment. And as I was telling you, Himanshu, it is BC and AC. It is before Corona and after Corona now. And now we are somewhere in the middle of BC and AC. We are not still in AC. Maybe in 6 months we'll be in AC, or maybe in 21 we'll be in AC. But this is a great time for us to introspect, to check out all the basics and go into the new era with new basics. So let's say I'm talking from a business point of view. If I'm leading a big business organization, then we have to check the consumer business change. A leader will check a consumer business, how the consumer behavior.
Go ahead, Manoj.
Yeah. So first is the consumer behavior. How is the consumer behavior will change? Consumer behavior will change dramatically after this crisis, because it's very clear that consumers are becoming frugal. Consumers are going online. Many things which consumers were not doing till 3 months back, they're doing now. And based on that, an organization will get a new strategic direction, maybe a new business model, which is profitable, but in a different way than last business model. So clearly, the businesses are going after something new. Businesses are going after cash conservation. I've got, for example, 20 companies in India of my group, which I'm supporting. We are all going after a much higher degree of cost efficiency, higher productivity, cash conservation, new products and new markets. Now, the leadership has to create a new momentum in the company and maybe instill a new performance culture. So I believe that this is a real test of a leadership, because what is the leadership of tomorrow?
Yeah.
A leader who is agile, a leader who is flexible according to the new circumstances, a leader who is humble and authentic. Authenticity is very, very important, because if leader is not authentic, people will not follow him. And finally, and most importantly, he has to understand the socio-political changes so that he adjusts himself with self-management and helps all other colleagues to adjust. Because frankly, there will be many businesses which will not survive. There could be businesses where people have to be shed and new leadership will emerge. Wastages have to be eliminated. So I believe that it's the biggest test of political leadership. It's a huge test of business leadership, and leadership has to pass this test. And I agree with the earlier speaker. If the self-management of leader is in place, then he or she can pass the test. If leaders can't manage themselves, can't discipline themselves, can't understand frugality themselves, then it's very difficult for leaders to change the entire organization or the company. Thank you, Himanshu. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you. And I like the focus on self-preservation and self-management, because self is the greatest asset that we have at this point of time. And if we can take care of this asset, I think we can be far more effective for others. I'll go later, and I'd like to invite Mr. Budd at this point of time and hear his thought process. Mr. Budd, over to you.
Thank you, Himanshu. I have jumped the queue, I realize.
Yes.
So after these two great speakers, I hope I am able to bring myself up to their standards. So the way I look at it and the way everybody is saying it, this is a crisis in which leaders are being tested like never before. We can talk about thousands of years back. We can talk about wars. We can talk about famine. We can talk about the global financial crisis. This kind of crisis has never come. And there is not only one crisis that is going on at this time. The way I look at it, there are 5 simultaneous crises running. So the first is the health crisis, and that is what has started it all. But linked to the health crisis, the economic crisis, thanks to the lockdown across the world, over 200 countries, there are millions, possibly billions of people without a job, without a safety net, without cash, without food, without hope. So there is a second crisis. And linked to it is the third crisis, the social crisis. Look at the pictures in India and the videos which come on TV. Millions of migrants walking or bicycling hundreds of kilometers onto their homes because where they are living and work, there is no life, there is no work, there is no wages, there is no food. Imagine millions of people in my country are today in such despair, and except for noise, except for just empty words, they are not getting anything. So there is a huge social crisis going on. Simultaneously, because of the lockdown.
Just one request, guys. Somebody's speaker is on. If you could just put yourself on mute.
So simultaneously, because of the lockdown and because of the complete clamp down on travel, there is now an oil shock. You can actually get oil and be paid for it. And the reverberations of this oil shock are going to be huge. There are countries like Libya, Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, Nigeria, whose 80 to 90% of the national budget is made out of their oil revenues. Can you imagine what will happen to them? They are ripe for a social revolution. They are ripe for famine, hunger, war. You name the worst thing that humanity has shown in the past 100, 200, 1,000 years, these countries are ripe for it, right? So that is the other thing, oil shock. And linked to all of these, therefore, is the leadership crisis. Which is why I said that this is a leadership crisis. This is a crisis where leaders are being tested like never, ever before. So what do we do as leaders? And I'm counting all of us as leaders because today leadership is distributed. It is not the man at the top, but any man who has an opinion, any man who has a heart, any man who has commitment, any man who owns the situation, who has belongingness, any man who can shape, lead, guide his people is a leader. And therefore, the biggest crisis is the crisis of leadership. It's not only about corporate leadership. It is beyond the corporates. It's a socio-political leadership. It is national and international leadership. It is leadership in academia. It is leadership in technology. It is leadership in philosophy. It is leadership in spirituality, because we will need all these aspects of human knowledge and human leadership to survive through this crisis. So as a leader, what is the first thing that I have to do? And I have been thinking about it. And, leaders, the very definition of the word leader is a very macho definition. It brings in, pictures of some guy in a big suit with a gun and this, that, and the other. But the way I think about it, what is required at this point of time for these multiple simultaneous crises that are accosting us is a very thoughtful communication. People have just now said that there is a huge uncertainty. I was talking about Indian migrants. Can you imagine the fear which is there inside them? Can you imagine the anxiety that they have about their jobs, about their children, about their family, about their future, about their health, about their well-being? And there is, because these people are at the middle or the bottom rung of the ladder, nobody is reaching out to them. So the first responsibility of leadership today is thoughtful communication. You have to reach out to these people. You have to comfort them. You have to hug them emotionally. You have to hug them in their thoughts. You have to make them realize that they are not alone. Now, these people could be your employees. These people could be your part of your community. These people could be fellow citizens, or these people could be somewhere, anywhere in the world. But people are hankering for this emotional connect and emotional comfort because they really do not know. See, when you have this kind of despair in your heart, you can break down very easily. People talk about emotional agility, but it is just talk. For these people, where is the emotional agility? You have to help them with emotional agility. And that is, I think, the biggest task of a leader today. You have to help them to land with their emotions in a safe place inside their being, inside their heart. You have to help them understand that because they're going through this emotionally intense phase, actually, therefore, they are learning what is more important to them. What I am learning is my family is very important. What I'm learning is my job is very important to me. These are the things that I'm learning, and maybe it prepares me better for the future. So I think this is the very first responsibility of a leader, thoughtful communication. So we can talk about, business continuity plans and succession planning and supply chain disruption and all that. But I feel that basically it is at the human level, which is most important. And the other is, at a slightly macro level, leaderships have evolved over time. In the time of Alexander, etc., a leader was a man who was very tall, well-built, very powerful, very loud, heard everywhere, he could do anything, etc. So over time, it became slightly cerebral. So when I was a student, there were tests on mathematics or logic or English, etc., because, the requirement of leadership became cerebral. Then it broadened a little bit, when you started talking about emotions and emotional agility, then the gig economy came. But now actually we are talking about A, we are talking about distributed leadership. B, we are talking about leadership without hierarchy, without power, not the earlier, routine kinds of leadership. We are talking about leadership which has a moral compass, leadership which leads through truth and courage. Because in a time of the COVID, when somebody said that the whole thing is going to be reset, how will you understand what is this reset? What is the reset going to take you to? Because mind you, there is no end of COVID now. This is not even the end of the beginning. Maybe this is the, we have a very long time. Somebody says 6 months, somebody says 2 years. Nobody knows. There is no data. There are a lot of guesswork. There is a lot of intelligent guesswork. Some people are saying it will keep on coming again and again forever, for 5 years, for 2 years, for 6 months. There is all kinds of things that are being said. But what everybody is agreed on, that this is a huge reset for humankind. It will be a reset for sustainability. It will be a reset for climate change. It will be a reset for tolerance. It will be a reset for many of the values that we have cherished, but in our competitive race had forgotten. It was always me first, this thing to do, that thing to do, forgot family. I'm amazed sometimes when I hear now that sometimes when families are together, they actually do not know what to do. And there are other families who are delighted that they have the time to be together. Imagine there is a family which is not together and they're a little uncomfortable because they are together. But that is happening. That is also happening.
That's the kind of paradox. Yeah.
It's a kind of a paradox, but it is happening. So the challenge for leadership, as I said, is therefore leaders require a moral compass, which has to be weighted with truth and courage. So that is one of the things, right? Then everybody talks about emotional intelligence. But what I am saying is that you should have social and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, by definition, is, unilinear. it has to be multipolar, and therefore it must be social and emotional intelligence, so that you can intuitively understand what is happening, what is right, what is wrong, what is to be done. The third thing about the leadership is, and this of course everybody talks about, built to emotional and social intelligence, is curiosity, is creativity, and I think Harry talked about it, is vulnerability. You have to take decisions in a short time. You have to take decisions. We don't have enough data, so you need to have tolerance for ambiguity. And then when things go wrong, as they will, you need to have the humility to accept that you are wrong, and therefore you need to expose your vulnerable side. Not be proud about vulnerability, but show it that, look, you're a human being who cares. You're a human being who's willing to stand up. You're a human being who's willing to suffer for his colleagues. Show that side of yours as a vulnerability. Leaders need not be strong in the military sense. Leaders need to be strong in the vulnerable sense, that he is vulnerable and yet he has the courage to go on and on and on. Then today's leader, I'll just take 2 minutes. So today's leader also needs to understand the magic of technology. So I'm not saying the power of technology. I believe, and I don't understand technology very well, but I believe technology can do almost anything, or can be made to do in the near future almost anything. When you are talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about robots, we're talking about sensors. We are talking about a whole gamut of things that technology can do. So the leader should be able to understand technology, and he should use all these intelligences and insights that these various things bring to him to do a few things. One is to craft a purpose for himself and his organization, whatever he's leading. Then to draw up a vision, and then to execute on that vision, because to transform that organization, because transformation will not come unless all these things are in place. And the transformation will have to be in the context of reset. It cannot be the normal context. More sales, more profits, more margins, more territory, more distribution, more stuff, more market cap. It cannot be in that sense. It has to be in a different sense. So this is what I think is the challenge that we have. And I also fortunately think that collectively, I think we are up to that challenge, but it will not happen without a lot of trying. It will not happen without a lot of persistence, because there'll be people who will not buy this story. There'll be people who are happy on the other side because there are obvious advantages to them. And that is, I think, the challenge that the collective right-minded leadership has in the time of COVID.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. I see that you have elevated the discussion that how purpose, authenticity, and you spoke a lot about emotional intelligence in getting and landing people through their heart so that this safe resurrection can begin. We'll move to the next speaker, Eric Schoenberg. Eric, over to you.
Himanshu, thank you. Unlike the previous speakers, I'm a practitioner, not a coach, and not a leadership coach, so I can talk about my experiences on the ground, sort of in the economic war that we have all been flung into by the pandemic. It's amazing to think that just 6 weeks ago, my organization was convinced that we were all going to the giant technology conference called South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. And that was going to make our quarter. It was the biggest South by Southwest we'd ever had. We had doubled revenues from the previous year. 2020 was off to an amazing start, and it looked like it was going to be smooth sailing for the rest of the year. What has happened since has been a kind of rolling confrontation with reality that has slapped me in the face time and time again. With South by, first, what happened was that our sponsors, we get 80% of our revenues from advertising sponsors, began to peel away one by one, canceling their contracts at South by Southwest. And then finally, the conference itself was canceled. Until the last minute, we thought we were going. Actually, in retrospect, it's a great thing that 3,000, 5,000, 20,000, however many people are supposed to go there, did not converge on one place and then disperse to the rest of the world. That's a very, very good thing, even though it was terrible for my company. The first leadership challenge I had was to communicate to people the health of the organization and to communicate to them that the leadership cared about their not getting sick. March 11th was the last day that we were in the office, and I sent everyone home from the office the minute we heard that someone at the company was symptomatic with COVID. Over the rest of the following 6 weeks, I do a daily Slack, Ask Me Anything, in which I report to everyone what the health of their colleagues is. So far, we've had about a dozen people turn up symptomatic. Many of them have tested positive, but so far no one has been severely sick, thank goodness. That challenge then transformed itself into a business challenge. The same experience I had with South by of seeing one advertiser after another fall away in this kind of torturous drip, drip, drip of abandonment began to happen in the other parts of our business. On the website, advertisers in the magazine, and of course the events business ground to a halt. Eventually, I've had to face reality that this year is pretty much a write-off, that the difficulties will extend beyond the second and third quarter, and that this first quarter that we had was going to have to carry us through, and we were going to have to tighten our belts in some ways that would be painful. But I did draw the line at doing layoffs. I think that throwing someone out into the economy at this point would be cruel, and there would be no opportunity for them to find another job for obvious reasons. And so that's where I've drawn the line. So among other things, I've frozen hiring. I canceled the July-August issue of the magazine. We've canceled most of our events, as you can see. And the big debate in the company right now is whether the big tentpole events in the fall will be virtual or live. Still a debate how we'll do that. Let me talk now about the lessons as a leader that I've learned, the things that I found were most effective. The first is simply to be present. I have found that people want to see you, and that the payoff for just showing up is tremendous. People want to be comforted. They want to see your demeanor. You need to be calm. You need to be honest with them when you meet them. But simply coming to their meetings and things like that has been incredibly powerful. So what I've done is increase the cadence of our all hands town halls. They used to be every few months. Now they're every few weeks. I have a daily meeting with my leadership team as opposed to every 2 weeks. And occasionally I drop in on the meetings that my department heads have with their staff as well, just to show up, just to answer questions. And then, as I said, I have that daily Ask Me Anything about the health of the company, in which I post daily on our Slack channel so that everyone has a sense of who's well, who isn't well, and how we're doing on that front. And finally, every Friday, I do a company announcement about our little gift, our little fun engagement for the weekend. And those included things like something we call Bagels on Joe weekends. So bagels, the kind of comfort food for Americans in the Northeast, had been a tradition at the company. Every Friday we would bring in bagels and everyone could line up at the breakfast bar and eat them. Of course, when we're all living in our homes, you can't do that, but we could reproduce it by encouraging people to have bagels delivered to their home, share them with their family, and expense it to the company. Also, everyone in the company has a free subscription to the app Calm, the meditation app. And we've also encouraged everyone to buy surgical masks on Etsy or something like that and expense it to the company. We also try to keep it lighthearted in all the town halls. So the town halls, in addition to the talk about the state of the company, we intersperse all of that information with polls on what people think about the latest hot television show, or what people think about how they're coping living with kids or with spouses inside the house, just keeping it lighthearted. In acting, when they're trying to, when acting coaches teach actors how to show on stage that they love another character, what they say, the active verb that they should think of is to pay attention. So to pay attention to your staff is a way to show that you love them. Appreciate everyone. Make sure that no praiseworthy activity goes unpraised, and celebrate the wins. Show people that they're making progress, which, as we know, is the most important connection with employee satisfaction. So even in this difficult environment, talk about the things that you're doing right. We've talked about how we've increased the number of videos that we've produced, about how we have sold more applications to some of our recognition programs, things like that. Any kind of win in the middle of so many kind of overall difficulties and headwinds. And finally, coach your leaders. The people have the closest contact with your line workers, with the majority of people who work for you, will be your department heads and the people who report to them. So make sure that the leaders that you lead are coached, that their spirits are good, that they know what the mission of the company is, that they know what the plan is, and that they're communicating that on a regular basis with their people. All the things that I've said were important to me as a leader, about being present, about paying attention, about celebrating wins, showing progress, and being lighthearted. All of those should be practiced by your department heads and by the leaders who report to you. Himanshu, back to you.
Thank you, Eric. Firstly, my heart goes to you and your company. I remember how bustling experience was when I was there in the Impact Council and how situations are. I'm sure things will take a turn. But some of the things that you are doing on ground are really amazing. And I can very closely relate to that, to the military leadership also being present, celebrating small wins, and being there with them. These are, so one thing which I am learning is that basics don't change, the basics of leading, and that are always relevant in such scenarios. What is really important, what I see, is that how creative we can get in terms of winning the hearts and minds of people so that we keep them positively engaged. Thank you, Eric, for bringing these really grounded and practical inputs. All right, folks, so I'm going to share a few things from my experiences. So every time I came face to face with a crisis, I tried to do two things. One, quickly dig into my past and see what lessons I can borrow. And I'm paying attention to two words: quickly dig and borrow. Why quickly? Because we don't want to dwell too much on past, because critical time is being wasted. Why borrow? Because selectively borrowing from past is a good idea, because we cannot replicate the frameworks of past completely. I always believe that past is a place of reference and not residence. The second thing is, be a first-time learner. Appreciate and understand the situation. It's complete nevet. There is power in nevet. So the combination of digging into the past and being a nevet gives us good credibility and wherewithal to deal with the crisis. Some of the things that I learned in my military training and the life beyond taught me a few things which I'm going to share with you. First and foremost is, in our academy, we used to read this too shall pass. Now, from the history of human evolution and a series of natural and artificial crises, one thing that has really stood out at all the time, that everything had a beginning, it has an ongoing middle, and will surely have an end. We saw the beginning in January, experiencing a middle, and will surely see and have an end to this also. But we all know that the middle of anything is always the longest phase, including our life. So prepare, and prepare well, with every ounce of our thinking, creativity, and actions. We can't let ourselves perish in the middle. In the military training, we were told that even if we were to perish, we must have the aspiration to see the flag hoisted at the victory at the hilltop before we even think of perishing. Because glory is reserved for those who reach the peak and hoist the flag. So some of the core lessons from this part of narrative is faith, everyday nurturing faith that this too shall pass is a very important criteria. Second is digging into the past and borrowing quickly. Realize and prepare for a prolonged middle phase and aspire for glory to hoist your victory flag at the top of the hill peak. Now, one significant thing that I would like to borrow from my 18 months of military training is the outlook towards hell. Trust me, those 18 months were hell. And we learned 3 powerful lessons in that hell. Lesson number 1, a hell is a hell till we are hell-bent on making it a hell. I'm going to repeat that. A hell is a hell till we are hell-bent on making it a hell. So what's the choice? Make peace with it. Find friends in the hell. Explore the joy. Get creative with it. If possible, fall in love with it, but discover the holiness in hell. And there are many examples, like Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island in a small prison. He found the holiness in the hell. So if you have to live in the hell for 18 months, would you still like to call it a hell? For God's sake, change the name. I mean, what kind of spirit or resilience we'll be left with if we call it hell every day? And in the academy, we had 3 terms of 6 months each. We learned that the last term hell was much better than the previous 2 terms. So imagine if we have to wait through for 18 months, the first hell will be severe, which is almost coming to an end. The next one will be lesser and lesser, and that's how things will pass through. I'm not trying here to be a pessimist, but my realistic intuition nudges me to be prepared for a long haul of 18 months with 3 terms of 6 months each. Okay, so finally, we also learned the second lesson that 18-month period was not the last hell we suffered, and not the most severe one. In my long 20 years of military career, we experienced multiple hells of varying duration and intensity, ranging from a 3-day raid to a 40 days hot pursuit in jungles to a 6-month stay in bunker at 21,000 feet with 45 to minus 45 degrees of temperature. Yes, that 18 months hell certainly prepared us to face many subsequent hells. My second lesson, which I like to borrow, is called the rule of preservation and survival. Now, COVID-19 is a long-drawn battle. How long, we really don't know. So what should be the rules of fighting a long-drawn battle? I found 3 rules very effective, which I'm sharing with you. The first one is rule of preservation. Second, the rule of graceful survival. And third is rule of triple R, which I call routine, rituals, and rhythm. Let me talk about rule of preservation. What do we preserve? Preserve our health and fitness, which Manoj spoke about, Harry spoke about. We need to maintain our physical fitness, mental robustness, emotional resilience, and spiritual strength. Second is the preservation of resources, the cash, the ammo, the rations, the means of survival. The third preservation is of hope and realistic optimism. And fourth, to my mind, which I really cherish very high, is the preservation of creativity and human spirit. Trust me, our spirit is far stronger than we think, or our body. So engage in pursuits that can keep this spirit going. The next is rule of graceful survival. Now, in this battle, survival is the victory, not prevalence. We don't have to prevail. Yeah, we don't have to prevail over anything except our self-doubt, anxiety, and fear. So put all your efforts and energy and engagement into survival. Now, let me tell you one of the secrets of survival. First, a purpose beyond you. Second, have an unfinished agenda. We used to, in many of the combat operations, we used to tell ourselves, oh, I'm not done yet. I have an unfinished agenda, which could be seeing the family, which could be seeing anything else, publishing unfinished books, whatever could be. And third, which makes your survival easy, is the learning. The 3 rules of graceful survival: purpose beyond us, unfinished agenda, and learning. Now let me talk about this routine, rituals, and rhythm. If I have to craft, I will call it routine plus ritual equals to rhythm. In all the hells that I have lived through, these 3 things really stood out as by far the best mechanism for graceful survival. So much for leading self, which Harry actually triggered the thought process. Now let me highlight some critical aspects for leadership in long drawn battles such as these. Leaders are prone or bound to develop decision fatigue. Now what is this decision fatigue? Decision fatigue can happen when leaders think, oh, they need to make lots of decisions and get them right. They often measure themselves by the number of decisions they have made. Doesn't really work like that. So my advice here is to do not need to focus on how many decisions, but get those few decisions right. And this is where what Harry said, that surround yourself with people who have value, who have the intellect, who have the ability to reason things and distribute the process. Another decision fatigue could be when you don't have too many decisions to be made. Now imagine if I said that this middle is going to be the long. You can't have every day too many variables. In any case, nature is healing and paused. So sometimes not having too many decisions can also create fatigue. Do not let either kind of decision fatigue impact our capacity to think. To think clearly, choose precisely, and act decisively. My second last input or perspective today is that people can take the truth, provided leaders have and develop the courage to demonstrate it. I have personally experienced that and delivered some of the harshest truth to the people, both in the corporations and the combat situation. What we need to do is to prepare people to accept and embrace the truth. One of the best examples that come to my mind in the recent times is the emotional video speech of Arne Sorensen, the president and CEO of Marriott Hotel. If you've not seen that, I suggest you check it out. It's really very emotional, yet it conveys the truth in a very significant manner. My final comment is that leadership's biggest responsibility is to take position, make a choice, and take a decision. Now, not taking a decision is the biggest failure of leadership. Now, every decision has an outcome or a consequence. Now, I must have taken 20, 30 decisions in my life, both in the combat and the other side. Now, through my own experiences, I found that in every decision taking, there are 3 things which are really important. The first one is stakes. What are the stakes in the decision? In every decision, there are stakes involved. It is a tough job to balance those stakes. And some, in pursuit of balancing those stakes, miss the bigger picture. The second thing is called implications. When you take a decision, there will be some short-term pulls, strains, which I call implications. Now, these are inconveniences, cost of decisions, but they have to be endured. For the sake of implication, we can't ignore the big picture. And finally, the impact. It is the impact which is most significant factor that cannot be ignored. So in an unprecedented crisis like this, my weightage would be to see the impact, then talk about the implications, and then look at the stakes. I have 2 stories to share. The first story is of Code Zero operation against Osama bin Laden. Now, Obama had a similar dilemma. The intelligence was 50-50 as per CIA Chief Leon Panetta. Obama had the stakes in terms of Congress, Senate, opposition party, people of America, and world at large. He had to factor the implications of not finding him there. Global backlash, operational failures, loss of surprises. He also thought of the impact that it could create. There was a major psychological war Americans were waging for a long time. It was a promise made in every last 2 elections that we will eventually get him. So he weighed in favor of the impact, and luckily he got it right. So stakes, implications, and impact are key. The another story which is in my mind is the comparison of the two leaders of largest democracy and the biggest democracy. Now, in case of the biggest democracy, it is perceived that more weightage was given initially to stakes and implications, and the impact is there to be seen in terms of the numbers. In case of the largest democracy, the leader made a choice in favor of the impact and chose to deal with the implication stakes with lesser weightage, and numbers are there to be seen. So bigger the problem, greater is the weightage to be given to the impact. So these are some of my thoughts I thought I could share from the experience that I've had. So what we'll do, we'll take one or two questions from each of the panelists, and then we'll throw open the forum to the audience. Harry, what's your take in terms of, from the vantage point that you are, how do you see this entire thing playing out? What's your hypothesis?
First of all, I've really enjoyed, I've already taken like 12 pages of notes, so I've learned a lot just listening to you and to all the other great speakers. That's great. I'm one of these people, I always admit what I know, what I don't know. So I don't think we know how long this will last. As some of the speakers said, I don't think we know all the implications of it. But I do believe if we focus on some of the things that we talked about, we will get through this. And hopefully we'll be smarter and better for the future as a result of doing it. If we do some of the things that Eric talked about, where we truly care about every single person. And I really do believe that very simple model of leadership, influence, relate. If you can't relate to people, you can't get anything done. And how, by being honest and truthful, as you said, people can deal with reality. The example that I've been using a lot in class, and some of you are aware of the example, and I can send the video to you, Majid, that it was a lesson that Jim Collins, the fellow who did Good to Great, talked about this thing called the Stockdale Paradox. And the short summary of it was he interviewed people that had been prisoners of war and tried to understand, why did the great majority of people that were prisoners of war die or go crazy? And the response immediately was, well, they were overly optimistic. And it was, well, wait a minute, aren't they the people that would survive? And he used the example of, well, we'll get out of here by December. And then we didn't get out by December, people got depressed, or get out of here by June. And the whole idea is a belief that, no, wait a minute, we will get out of here. As a team, we will get out of here. But we don't know how long it's going to last. We just don't know. But we will be brutally honest. We'll be very, very open. And we'll continue, as you said, we'll exercise, we'll take care of ourselves, we'll help one another, we'll be there, we'll be present, and we'll get through it. But I think that combination of being realistic and knowing, by taking care of ourselves and taking care of one another, a little bit of prayer as well, we will get through this and we'll be stronger. How long this will last? I worry about the people who say, oh, it'll be May 30th, it'll be June, nobody really knows. But I think by being realistic about it and doing all the things that the speakers have talked about, we'll get through this, and I think we'll be stronger as a result.
Thank you. You know, what you're triggering me is, in these periods, very important to ask the right question. So when someone says how long, it's time to challenge how this question is relevant. Why don't we change the question? What is the best we can do? So instead of asking how long, it's time to reframe the question. What is that we can do now to make it flourish and make it productive? Eric, I would love to know personally what new leadership skills that you are learning this experience, and what is your message to others, the kind of skills that they can learn from such experiences?
One of the leadership skills that I'm learning, reluctantly, but because it must be done, is to be realistic. In Harry's example of the Stockdale Paradox, I would have been one of the POWs who didn't make it, because I kept thinking, oh, of course those sponsors from South by Southwest will roll over into one of our other events. And when they began to fall off there too, reality hit me like cold water in the face. So it is a truly essential skill, as many of our speakers said, and as Harry just repeated, to be clear-eyed about what is really happening, and then be honest with your team about that. Himanshu, I liked what you said about the team can take the truth as long as you speak with authority and with true concern for the team, and point them towards that that top of the mountain. So that's one of the things. The other thing I learned was that what people want from you as a leader is not so difficult. You talked about leaders having decision fatigue and wanting to be right on every decision and being part of every decision and over guiding things. What I think people really want in this moment is knowledge that someone is in charge, that someone who is in charge, cares about them and cares about the future. And I think they read a tremendous amount into your demeanor, and that there's a great benefit simply to being calm, and being calm and forthright and goal-oriented and long-term optimistic, not overly optimistic, but long-term optimistic, is much more important than knowing the answers to every question.
Thank you. That really conveys a lot. And this way they see the vulnerable side, the human side of you, and they can relate to.
Yes.
Correct. Manoj, I would love to hear from you some of the tips about self-preservation and self-management. What are the things that you can advise to people that they can pick up and take care of that?
Well, thank you, Himanshu. I think it's very clear that a humane leader is the most important thing at this situation. A leader who is himself or herself both authentic and vulnerable, which means that he's honest, he's straight, how he manages himself, how he manages his vulnerabilities, he has to share in a very authentic, honest way. So that's the most important thing about leadership. Now, as you go through this journey, the journey could be 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever it is. And I agree that nobody can precisely predict, but it's better to be ready with a long haul, for a long haul. The three phases I see. First phase is creating a faith and trust. I think you gave an example of India. I think that if you see this first phase, a lot of trust and faith is being created. And that's very important, because if for a long haul journey, if trust and faith is not there, it's difficult to sustain a long haul journey. Number two is keep holding hands. Keep holding hands, whatever, up and down, because there will be ups and downs during the journey. And it's very important to keep holding hands, never leave them. So the team and employees and citizens, they know that there's somebody here. There's somebody caring, so somebody who is worried and concerned about us. And number three is together take us out. Employees and citizens both want a leader who will take them out of this together. Not that he will run up first, not that he will be selective, but he takes everyone out of this situation, this catharsis, so that people feel a higher degree of faith as the time passes. So that's what I think leadership has to instill through this long journey.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you very much. Mr. Bhatt, I would like you to talk about how do you keep the morale and the spirit of people intact amidst this gloom and despair that is prevailing all over.
Let me unmute myself.
Yeah.
So it's both easy and difficult. And as I mentioned earlier when I was speaking, the idea is to connect with them through conversation. How do you make a conversation better than it could be? How do you make a conversation where there is an automatic connect taking place, not only at the emotional level, but also, what you're talking about, subjects, contents, etc. So once you are able to connect, and I feel that conversation is a very powerful tool of connecting with people. And if you're able to connect, then that gives you the basis with which you can actually build bonds, solve problems, create a vision, go to the future. You can do anything. And I find with different classes of people, see, even if you look at the COVID, now what is happening about COVID is, if you look at it, at one level, it seems that everybody is doing the same thing, every country is doing the same thing. But if you look at it closely, different countries have reacted differently. Sweden, there is no lockdown, none. Life is going on as usual. They are only doing social distancing and testing. In India, there is a complete lockdown. And within India, different states are doing different things. Odisha is different from Kerala. And what UK is doing is, first that, they just behave like an ostrich. It will go away with herd immunity. Then they went the other way. America started a little late. So when you start talking to people about these things, suddenly the granularity of all of it sinks in. That, oh, okay, maybe it is possible to do something about it. Maybe I have not understood it properly. Maybe there is a different angle with which you can look at the same thing. So this is one of the things that is happening. And the other thing that is happening is that I find that many people, so I know some people, and I think I mentioned it to you the other day, I know some people who are, so joyous, so humorous that they can't have a conversation without half a dozen jokes thrown into it, some witty statement, something or other. These people now, sometimes or every time that they speak, in addition to their normal self of being witty and joyous and, cracking jokes, they also throw in here and there statements about concern, about pain, about what is happening, about uncertainty, etc., etc. And I find it increasingly happening to more and more people. So again, it is just conversing and suddenly people are on a different plane. So what I'm seeing is, and what I want the current leadership to do, and I did speak about leadership a little bit before, was that is it possible to somehow drive all of us to be able to make significant behavioral changes for each one of us, whether it is washing hands or whether it is social distancing, and many, many, many more, where you do some sacrifice and this, that, and that. Is it possible for us to make significant behavioral changes on a large scale, social scales, for the common good? So if we can, have this journey, and again, as I said, all of us, bit by bit, little by little, one point here, another point there, if you can together do it, post-COVID, it will be a different world. So these are the thoughts around which some of these conversations that I have with people go through. And I find that not only do they gel, but they come back, with something different or something more, which again takes it in a different direction, but in the right direction.
Thank you. One of the things which I observed that world's media and everyone's attention is only focused on negativity. There's so much of goodness which is happening, which no one is propagating, amplifying, exemplifying. It's never heard that the two companies which were terrible competitors are collaborating to create a vaccine. So Sanofi and GSK, they had the two different pieces of the puzzle, and they found that the best for them is to collaborate and make it happen. So some of the amazing things are going to come through as part of this crisis that we are experiencing. Thank you for all the input. So friends, we have the panel open for you. If you would like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself and go. Yes, Vikesh, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I think right from Harry, we have been talking about leadership as the most important need of the hour. And in every other global crisis, we have had a leadership. This is probably the only one where we find a global leader giving a uniform, direction and uniform advice is sort of missing. Not to criticize anyone, but how critical would it be in resolving the issue? Can we go ahead and resolve the matter without having a global leader to lead us into this resolution? Mr. Bhatt or Harry, anyone who would like to answer?
Okay. Go ahead, panelists.
Harry, you want to take it first and then I can supplement? Or would you like me to go first?
Sure, I'll make a comment, and I'd love to hear your views. I guess the way I look at it is, in a perfect world, hey, if there happens to be some overall leader, that's nice. But when every time there's a crisis or an issue, and we talk about who's going to deal with it, who's going to make a difference, we always refer to this almost around the world, this famous group of people called those guys. There's some man or woman, some famous man or woman somewhere. And I like to remind people, we are those guys. I mean, everyone on this call, we are the men or women. So if there happens to be somebody else out there who can help, great, but we're not waiting for anybody. We are those guys. And whether we're managing the world or 1,000 people or just ourselves, I think we can each make an enormous difference. And I think that's what we're called to do. That's the way I think about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikesh.
I think very well put.
Himanshu, we also have some questions in the comment box by Raghavendra and Arun Murthy.
Okay.
Raghavendra is asking, what is your look? This question is for Mr. Bhatt.
We'll come to that question. Mr. Bhatt has a point on the previous question, then you can take that question.
No, I just thought that both of us were going to respond to it together. So I just wanted to add, I liked Harry's response very much. It's a very good response. And what occurred to me was that there is an English saying which says, cometh the time, cometh the man. When the time comes, the man comes, right? So to your point, that it is all of us there, so from where this leadership will come. So at the global level, there is, there is a lot of literature available currently that global leaders are not collaborating as much as they should. In fact, there is some kind of confrontation going on. There is some kind of politics also going on. But again, to quote Himanshu, which he said a little bit earlier, was that this too shall pass, because this crisis is so big, they'll realize that they just cannot solve it unless they sit down together. And this will not only be merely solving the medical part of the crisis, availability of PPEs and masks and medicines and testing kits and all that. It will also be about supply chains. It will also be about human beings. It will also be about that vision for the future, etc., etc. How long it will take for this global leadership to come together, and whether it will be the current guys who are in the global stage, or whether it will be different people who will come from amongst us, who may come through an electoral process, who may come through a revolution, who may come because they write in newspapers, whatever way. But these people are going to come because this is too good a crisis to waste. It has to happen. It has to happen. So that's what my belief is.
That's a good
Thank
point.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. Thank you so much, sir.
Anand, you can go ahead. Ask your question. You have to unmute yourself.
I want to question. Dr.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. My question is to any of the panel members. In this time of uncertainty, which is likely to result in many changes in jobs, in the way we do things, in business models, in strategies, and in businesses themselves, how do you all think professionals and leaders and people can prepare themselves for these changes, and how do they keep themselves adept at this forthcoming change all around?
So Manoj, since you are having a portfolio of 22 companies, why don't you take this question, and then others can chip in.
Yeah, very, very important question. I think the first thing is the leader's self-management. As I said earlier, how does he manage himself? Is he agile? Is he flexible? Is he authentic? Is he humble? And finally, can he lead with honesty? So once a leadership is in that mode, then it becomes easy, because then he basically has to listen to consumers and understand the voice of the consumer, which will be a new voice, which will have new requirements or new demands, new way of working, new speed. And all that he has to assimilate with his team and build a new business model for each company, because business models will change now. They have to be more unique and superior, more profitable, different from past. So, but what I understand during the last 1 hour is that you will reach to that stage once leaders show humanity in their approach and are able to lead people with care. And once you lead people with care and come out of it, it's very easy to get the business back.
Thank you. You know, the innovations are a direct outcome of problems. And this crisis has given us lots of problems. So in the design school or design thinking, they teach, if you can combine the user plus need, you have a point of view, which can lead to a new business model. So I think we are too caught up in seeing the problems having an overwhelming effect on us. And the moment that stabilizes, I think our lens will change to see the problems which are outside, and that can lead to a possibility. Anybody else would like to share this on this? Please welcome.
I'll take a swipe at it. I think that honesty, and I mean not just honesty with your team, but honesty with yourself about the challenges that your company faces is the key thing. It is so hard to leave behind the legacy businesses you have, to leave behind processes and other things that reduce your agility, that will be your biggest enemy as you face a world that is facing wrenching change. You have to be clear-eyed about where things are going, not bound by the processes and habits of the past. And you also need a very open pipeline to the people who are close to the customers. Don't shut off anyone. Take ideas from everywhere, and especially make sure that the people who are in conversation with customers have the freedom to make suggestions, and that you have the courage to act on those suggestions.
Yeah, I think this is
I just
even
have a
the
small
time
thing.
to get closer to customers, Harry. Yeah.
I just wanted to add something very small to this, is that if, you know, the desire to improve in this time of complexity is, you know, coming from deep down within you, then obviously you'll have a lot of energy, creativity, etc. So where I suggest one starts is, you know, there is this phrase known as known unknowns. We all know what we don't know. Can we list it? Can we prioritize it the way we see it is important for us today? Can then we reprioritize it as to where it will be easy for me to, you know, get to business in terms of knowing the unknown, and, you know, make progress in that way. I think you will find in a very short time, between a week to a month, that your awareness, and through that awareness, your capabilities have gone up multiple fold. And this is very simple. You can do it yourself in your own time. So I just thought I'll put this in.
Thank you. And that reminds me of a book. One of my favorite authors is Joel Barker, who is a futurist who's written many books on paradigms. So in his book, Paradigm of Business, he says the future is a function of three things. One is intent futurism. What is the intent for future? Second, he says, what content futurism? What is the content for future? And the third one is process futurism. What is the process for future? So what Mr. Butt, you said, the deep desire from inside, if you have the intent for future and you can start writing down through the content of the future, you will have the possibilities which you can then deploy through a process. We have time for two more questions, then we'll wind up. So anybody else like to go and ask the question? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, gentlemen, for insights. Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. First of all, thanks a lot for this opportunity. Feel incredibly grateful to be amongst all of you. So my question is, I head the finance department at my company, and I've graduated from an Ivy League school, right? But every time I communicate with many of my colleagues and my former classmates, the impression that I get is, hey, whatever we are going to come up, try to leverage from this crisis. Maybe the solution should not just be short term, right? let's not try to solve today's problems, but we need to solve something, create an opportunity which is going to be more sustainable. Plan to build something up for the next 5-10 years. Now, I feel this as an incredibly puzzling thing, because right now we are in probably one of humanity's worst crises. And when people are saying don't solve for this crisis, but make use of the opportunity to solve for something that's going to sustain 10-15 years, I don't know how to take that up. So I thought I'll just ask all of you what's your opinion on is on that, and how do I kind of like solve for this?
Yeah, anybody would like to take on? Yeah, Manoj.
No, I believe that both are important. Our immediate plan to extricate ourselves from this problem is important. But if we are not as leaders proactive for a slightly longer term, we are not talking of 10, 15 years. We're talking of a few years, maybe up to 3 years, because it's very important to understand that this year we may have a degrowth of business and a lot of people issues which we need to resolve. But next year, by the time it starts normalizing, what will be the new strategies? What will be the new products? What will be the new markets? What is the new way of doing business? All that thought process has to be initiated at the leadership level. If we don't talk about future and just be busy in today's firefighting, then we miss out something. So I feel both are important. The proportion may be different. Initially, the proportion of today's problem or today's fire may be higher, but gradually as the fire is getting extinguished, the proportion of future planning has to get bigger.
Thank you.
I just want to add to that, from my board perspective, so I sit on some boards. So what was said just now is what normally most presentations to the board on, planning is around. So there is a plan A and there is a plan B always. There is also a short-term plan and a long plan. Sometimes it is called vision, sometimes it is called strategy. So all those things sort of coexist in many boards and therefore in companies. But what I wanted to bring to your attention was that there is something now known as integrated reporting. I don't know how many of you have heard about it, integrated reporting framework. So now when there is an annual report, at least in India, and I know that it is in many countries across the world, UK, for example, it is there, US, it is there. On integrated reported, you have to talk about not only financial capital, but you have to talk about manufacturing, you have to talk about human, you have to talk about intellectual, you have to talk about social and relationship capital, and you have to talk about natural capital. So all these things are underpinning sustainability. So now your boss, in terms of integrated reporting, which is a legal requirement in every annual report of the company, at least in India and a few other companies across the world, is that you not only talk about your shareholder, you not only talk about the broader description of stakeholder, but you also talk about things like natural capital and social capital, and you have to talk about it by law. Now, when you talk about it in the report, obviously you have to make the effort that your business plans are seen to be in sync with growing these capitals. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Then you're not doing the right thing. So what I wanted to say was that there is already a movement, legal and corporate, which is trying to integrate all these multiple things. And in my mind, this COVID has given us an extra kicker to make it happen, better, faster, more consistent, and more meaningful. So maybe the ingredients are in place. We just have to stir the pot.
Thank you much, Mr. Bhatt. That's a very powerful perspective. Gentlemen, I'd like to invite one parting thought from all the panelists before we wrap up. Starting with Harry.
Sure. Well, related, I think that last question, it was always one of my favorite because it comes up in all of my classes. Sooner or later, for all of us in our businesses, the question will always be, well, geez, are we going to manage for the short term or the long term? What are we going to do? And I always say the answer is obviously yes. And the reason that people get complicated is I'll tease the students and I'll say, all right, well, what is 2020? What is 2020? Well, it's obviously the short term because we're living it. But some people forget that 2020 is the second year of the 2019 plan, and it's the third year of the 2018 plan, right? So when Eric told me 3 years ago, Harry, here's what I'm going to do in 2020, and now it's 2020, and I said, well, Eric, how are we doing? He says, well, Harry, I'm not really focused on the short term. I'm focused on the long term. And I always teach folks, I really loved all my years at Baxter, truly loved all my time there. But I love teaching now, and I intend to teach. But if any of you hear of a CEO job that opens up, and the only thing you have to do in the job is manage the long term, call me. I'll make a comeback for this job because you know, you make a lot of money and you're responsible for nothing because, you know, the future never comes. So this whole idea of is it short term or long term? The answer is always yes, at least my opinion.
Yeah, one of my favorite frameworks coined by Vijay Govindarajan, Tuck School of Business. He calls it three box framework. So box one is managing current. Box two is selectively forgetting past. And box three is creating future. The idea is to manage these three boxes together and have a healthy kind of strain among them. There will never be a time that once you are done with box one and then you will get a chance to do box two and box three. So it's very important to see where leaders are spending their time. If they spend all the time in managing current, the long term will go. Eric, what's your parting thought?
Well, I'd like to take the question of long-term versus short-term as well, because it is so central to a business, especially a business like mine that is in transition. But then what business isn't these days? What I find about managing for the long term is that it is a guidepost. That's the way I like to think of it. A number of our speakers, Harry, Mr. Bott, talked about the value system that are your guideposts for how you manage yourself and how you manage the culture of your company. I think of those strategic goals in the long term as the guideposts for the decisions you make in the short term. So if you know that where you want to get to is to shift your business model away from sponsorship to more revenue from consumers, then that is something you can keep in mind. You can have a plan and milestones, but what really makes that plan effective and means that in those out years you're getting there is that the short-term decisions you make are always made with that long-term goal in mind. It's just a sort of a rule. It's comparable to Harry's, I'm going to do the best I can and I'm going to try to do the right thing. You tell yourself, I'm always going to do the thing that makes it easier for us to move to this goal that we want to make in the future. And those opportunities in the short term that will move you towards the long term are things you might not anticipate. Often they're not things you can anticipate. But if you think that I'm always going to frame the decisions I make in the short term with this long-term idea in mind, you'll get there.
Thank you, Eric. And Harry said, doing the right thing and doing the best thing, it's not easy to do it. Every day you have to tell this to yourself to stay anchored. Is that right, Harry? Okay. Mr. Bhatt, what's your parting thought?
I've been speaking a lot. I have a quote from Jack Welch, which will summarize both current and long-term issues in one sentence. What Jack Welch said was that if the rate of change on the outside, that is rate of change in environment, society, whatever it is, and today we are talking about COVID. So if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the change that we as leaders can bring. So if the rate of change on the outside, that is say COVID, exceeds the rate of change on the inside, that is say we, the end is near.
We are getting closer to extinction.
Then the end is near. So that is a big impetus, you know, for us to do something short term, medium term, long term, very long term.
Thank you. Manoj, any parting thought from your end?
No, I will just supplement Mr. Bhatt. I feel that leaders, this is a great opportunity for leaders to drop their trained incapacity. You know, as leaders, we develop, like I've done 41 years of leadership, I think we develop a trained incapacity of doing certain things in a certain way. I think this is a great opportunity to shed that incapacity and do it in a new way. Manage it in a new way. Make it fresh. Make it new. make it something which is much more current. So I think that's very important.
Thank you, gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to thank all the panelists for having made themselves available. It's really, truly a delight. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for all the participants and asking the right question. I hope this conversation has been rich. Stay together, and grow together. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Himanshu.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Himanshu, and all the speakers and all the participants also. Sincerely appreciate being here with everyone. Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Bhatt. Thank you,
Thank
Sanjeev.
you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, fellow panelists.